Hey, I wanted to apologize if there's like an echo or something. I'm in a different area than I usually record, so it's just a heads up. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Patton cursed himself for what he'd just done and stayed still and quiet, hoping Virgil would just go back to sleep. Then there was a loud squeak. Patton looked up in time to see Virgil fall off the bed in surprise. Roman awoke from the commotion, and Virgil stood again quickly, his cheeks burning. "What were you doing?" he asked, trying to keep his embarrassment from his face. Patton quickly got off the floor and jogged over. He'd assumed that the two had gone to bed like that on purpose, and was now confused as to what was going on. Hey, kiddo, what's going on?" Roman smacked a pillow over his face and grumbled something onto it. Virgil ripped the pillow off again, now feeling fairly angry and wanting answers. "Why was I in your bed?" he demanded. Roman glared at the emo. He was not in the mood for this early in the morning. Patton didn't know what to do, so he retreated back towards Logan's bed, hoping to wake him up to get some help. "I put you on the bed with me because you slept horribly without me," Roman huffed. "I didn't want to leave you like that, so I took you with me." Virgil sat for a moment and let that sink in before slapping the pillow back over the other's face and used his hands to cover his own. The red on his face deepened and was no longer in anger and confused embarrassment, but now in pure embarrassment on what had actually happened and how he had reacted. Logan refused to wake after a few minutes, so his boyfriend gave up and moved back towards Virgil. Roman removed the pillow on his face and saw Virgil cupping his hands over his own. "Oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't know that upset you," Roman blurted, thinking that he'd been too harsh or done something wrong, and now Virgil was crying. "Tell me what I did and I'll never do it again." He pulled Virgil towards him in desperation, trying to figure out what he'd done wrong. Virgil just looked up and hated himself for not being able to help but smile. "You big idiot," he mumbled and looked at the other's face. Until he remembered Patton was there and pushed the other back onto the bed, trying to ignore his burning face and ears. Patton and Roman exchanged a look of being completely lost as Virgil face-planted onto his own bed. Patton shrugged and got back in his bed, wondering what the heck he'd just experienced. Virgil was secretly waiting for Patton to go back to sleep, and once he was sure that the fatherly figure had fallen, he slipped back into Roman's bed and wrapped his arms around his torso. Roman opened his eyes and looked surprisingly at Virgil. "Don't look too deep into it, Princey," Virgil snapped while closing his eyes. Roman smiled to himself as he cuddled the emo closer and closed his eyes as well. When it was really time for the four to awake, a few hours later, Patton was surprised that they were in the same bed once again. After Logan had his own reaction to the two, they tried not to bring it up again, aside from Patton questioning what it was all about. He still wasn't satisfied, but realizing the others were getting slightly uncomfortable, he decided to leave it for the time being. Patton did, however, notice that the two were being even more touchy today than the ones prior. Virgil wasn't a big fan of too much contact, but they seemed to always be touching the other in some way. He decided to talk to Logan about it once they were alone. It was a Friday night, so there was an annual bonfire after dark, and lights out was pushed to much later. The four boys were watching the fire when Remus showed up again, more like popped out of nowhere, and proposed they go night swimming. "I don't really know," Virgil said skeptically. "Are we even allowed to?" Remus laughed and waved a hand dismissively. "It's Friday night. We're allowed to do pretty much anything." Virgil looked to his cabin mates, who nodded, confirming his statement. "Come on," Remus insisted. "Swimming in the dark is the best." Virgil thought about it. Honestly, he didn't like wearing a swimsuit. It made him feel self-conscious. But now it would definitely be worse considering Roman would be there. The storm cloud almost fainted at the thought of Roman in a swimsuit. But it could be a fun experience he could have with his new friends, and it would be dark anyway. Virgil nodded a little, not fully confident. "Yes!" Patton squealed excitedly, grabbing Logan's arm and dragging his boyfriend to the cabin. "Fine," Roman said, not really opposed to the idea, "as long as you keep your shorts on this time." Virgil looked wide-eyed at Roman, then to Remus, who laughed a little. "Little old me? Of course I will." Virgil made sure to change last, and it took quite a while because he couldn't get the image of Roman out of his head. It was way worse than he'd expected, but it's not that Virgil was exactly complaining. He wrapped a towel around his shoulders protectively before stepping out and joining the others. He had to follow them since he had no idea where he was going. Roman grabbed his hand as they walked through the dark fields. Just enough light from the buildings was provided for the four to be able to see. Logan led the others to another cabin with a gold 10 next to the door to wait outside. Virgil looked around, confused, and tapped on Patton's shoulder, who was holding hands with Logan. Patton glanced at the smaller boy and tilted his head. "Why are we here?" Virgil asked once he had the father figure's attention, pointing to the door. Patton smiled and gestured to the building. "This is Remus's cabin. We're just waiting for him to come out." Virgil nodded in understanding, mouthing an O, and continued to look around the area. Though Roman, Logan, and himself were wearing trunks, Virgil was surprised to see Patton when he first exited the bathroom, wearing a one-piece suit, was sleeveless and covered his torso. It also had a little skirt attached to the bottom. Surprising, sure, but it suited him well. Dad pun intended. Remus soon came bounding out of the cabin in swim shorts and a lime-covered towel slinked over his shoulder. Logan paid no mind and continued walking past the cabin. Virgil nervously eyed Remus, now skipping on Roman's other side, still not accustomed to the other's presence. He wasn't trying to be rude, but he couldn't really help it. Remus's personality was just a little bit too intense for the anxious being. Virgil could now see that they were nearing water. The trees around it were thinning, and a wooden dock was exposed on the ledge, leading into the dark liquid. Remus started running to the dock, giggling like there was no tomorrow. He yelled, "Last one in the water is a pussing pig spleen." Virgil stopped short in shock and disgust. Everyone else seemed to be rolling with it. Patton let go of Logan's hand and began running after Roman's brother. "Nuh-uh," he yelled, while gaining on the other in green. "Catch me if you can, Pattycakes," Remus shouted back. Logan met Virgil's confused gaze and shrugged. Roman took back his attention when he squeezed the other's hand and looked excitedly over to him. "Come on, Virg," he exclaimed. "Let's go." Roman started playfully jogging after the other two, and Virgil joined in, actually racing now. He blew past Roman and even Patton, gaining on Remus, who had the biggest head start. Virgil had always liked running, especially on rugged terrain. It helped him calm his nerves and forget all his problems for a few moments. "Whoa, hey!" Roman exclaimed before pursuing the obviously faster boy. To not fall too far behind, Logan also started running. Remus made it to the dock first, Virgil very shortly behind him. Patton slowed and hopped up after them, hunching forward and panting. "I didn't know you could run like that, kiddos." Patton managed between gasps. Remus was standing on the edge of the dock, also breathing hard, facing the others, his back to the water. Roman and Logan weren't too far behind. Surprisingly, Virgil was in the best state out of all of them, even though he'd run the fastest. He found himself smiling. It felt good to be out like this. Remus turned his back to the water, folding up his towel and setting it on the dock. He dipped his foot into the water before bringing it out again and giving it a shake. "The water's actually pretty warm," he said, turning back. "Well, it is the middle of summer," Logan commented blatantly, pushing up his glasses. Roman rolled his eyes. Remus faced back forward, planning to jump into the pitch liquid. Then there was... What was that? Was that a light? He could have sworn he'd seen a dim pool of light ripple from the stream, even if it was just for a moment. He furrowed his brow and crouched for a closer look. Patton appeared a few feet behind him. "What are you doing, kiddo?" At the moment, another trickle of blue-tinted light trickled from the depths. Patton also saw it this time. They both stayed in a curious silence, Roman and Logan bickering about something behind them. Though Patton was interested, he had a greater duty to keep the argument from escalating any further. Virgil was watching in quiet amusement. Something raised out of the water. Remus swallowed a gasp as two eyes stared back at him. Just the top of the head was surfaced above the water up to the eyes. Remus stared back and managed a small wave. The dispute behind him was starting to calm at that moment, and the head raised higher until it was all the way out of the water. Fins were on either side of what Remus could now see was a he, or at least most likely. Scales lined the left side of his face, and the eye on the same side was cloudy and glazed over, contrasting to his other green eye. "What is that?" Logan exclaimed when he caught a glimpse of the figure, who then lowered back down in surprise, just his eyes visible again. Virgil creeped up slowly to look at the mysterious being. He calmly tilted his head to the side, which the figure copied. He then waved and smiled lightly. The others also carefully approached to get a look. He raised his head from the water once again. Hello," Patton tried, not quite sure what to expect. "Hello," they responded, a smile on their own face. Logan got as close to being excited as Logan can get. "Would you mind coming closer?" he asked, very intrigued. He shifted closer to the dock and pulled himself up. The others backed up slightly to give him room. They all couldn't help but gasp in surprise. Scales covered his back and parts of his arms, leaning down to his tail. "Are you a mermaid?" Roman blurted excitedly. The stranger looked confused and shook his head. Logan cleared his throat, which the others had picked up was a sign that he was about to go into nerd mode, as Roman called it. "I believe, from what I see, that he is what is known as a siren, a creature of Greek mythology which most commonly blamed for luring sailors to their deaths with their enchanting songs." Patton looked wide-eyed at the stranger and clung to Logan's arm. The stranger raised his hands in surrender-like motion. "Oh no, I'm nothing like that, I promise. I won't bring any of you harm." "So I was correct?" Logan pursued. He received a nod in response. "I wish I had my notebook," he fanboyed to himself. "So what's your name?" Remus asked. Virgil and Roman seemed to both have shut down in different ways. The creature hesitated for a bit before taking a deep breath. "My name is Janus." They stayed and talked with the stranger, and he told them about living with his own civilization in exchange for how life was on land. Before any of them knew it, it was past midnight. Patton was having a hard time keeping his eyes open, but he felt bad about just leaving Janus alone. Logan did notice, however, and he didn't like when Patton sacrificed his own self-care for the sake of others. "Patton, I think it's time we get you to bed. Speaking of, I believe it is an appropriate time for us all to head back." Virgil rubbed his eyes and stretched, and Roman nodded, begrudgingly. But Remus was a little bit more reluctant. "Do you think we can hang out again?" Virgil asked with a yawn. "Actually," Janus mumbled hesitantly, "could I come with you now?" The five looked at him with confusion. "We can't exactly, Logan started, gesturing to the other's tail. Janus just shook his head. "No, just, can I have a towel?" Roman handed over his white towel curiously. Janus started to dry himself off, and eventually his fins and scales were replaced by skin. He had legs. He quickly wrapped the towel around his torso and stood up, wobbling a bit before regaining his balance. He looked up to see them all staring at him. Jaws dropped with shock. "I've never done this before, so a little help, please." Remus ended up slinging one of Janus's arms over his shoulders and helping him try to walk back to the campgrounds.
They parted ways with the others, and Remus made sure they were quiet as they entered his cabin. "That towel must be uncomfortable. Let me get you some shorts or something."